The philosopher that we will study for today are the philosophers Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. Bakit dalawa? Ah, the reason is because connected yung philosophy nilang dalawa. Connected yung philosophy ni Bentham kay Mill. Because the philosophy of John Stuart Mill is a reaction and a affirmation of the theory of Jeremy Bentham. So, of course, unahin natin si Bentham kasi um, Bentham was also the teacher or the what do you call this? Nagturo kay Mill in terms of sa kanyang theories. Though ang katulong ng kanyang ni Bentham na nagturo is yung papa ni Mill. So Bentham is from London, and at a young age he is already considered a prodigy. Maaga siyang nag-aral, maaga siyang natuto, gano'n. Kung alam niyo yung mga bata na masasabi mong matalino, 'di ba meron yung mga bata na sobrang bata pa lang gano'n tapos straight na magsalita or ang dami ng alam, mga gano'n. Bentham in a way is similar to those children. So bata pa lang siya nakikitaan na siya ng what do you call this? Ng ng talino as a small child. And yon nag-attend siya sa Westminster School and nag-aral siya sa Queen's College sa Oxford. Nag-train siya as a lawyer. Actually, nakatapos niya yung mga subjects. But he never practiced law. He was never a lawyer, but he know his he know his laws. Alam niya yung mga batas niya. And nagamit niya yon rin sa kanyang theories and philosophy na kung mapapansin niyo later on is that yung kanyang theory is very connected to the society on how society should act. Yon. And nag-design siya ng isang kulungan na tinawag niyang panopticon or panopticon. Pinagtrabahuan niya yun ng 16 years para magamit ng government. But the government denied it. And para sa kanya, ang rason is that he was against the king. No, he was against anarchy. And sabi niya nga, to describe the king, sabi ni Bentham, the king is an aristocratic elite and acts on his own interest. Kaya nga hindi 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 convinced si Bentham sa anarchy. Yes, sa monarchy I should say. Kasi nga he is against this idea kasi ang tingin niya is the king is something na selfish. And dahil doon hindi rin tinanggap ng king yung kanyang plano or yung prison na plinano niya. Kasi nga meron silang personal feud at ng leaders ng government. So he is considered the founder of modern utilitarianism. Hindi siya ang pinakaunang theorize about utilitarianism. But ang kakaiba kay Bentham is that siya ang nag-collect ng mga ideas about utilitarianism and then pinag-isa niya to, pinag-combine niya, synthesize niya para magkaroon siya ng sarili niyang theory. So yun yung ginawa ni Bentham. That's why he is arguably considered the father of utilitarianism. Ano ba ang utilitarianism? Sabi ni Bentham, it is the greatest happiness of the greatest uh, na doble yan, sorry. It should be, it is the greatest happiness of the greatest number. That is the measure of the right and wrong. So that means na the greater the happiness para kay Bentham, then the better it is. The more moral it is, sabi ni Jeremy Bentham. But then, ang tanong ko naman ngayon sa inyo, for you personally, what is happiness? We talk about happiness in the theory of Bentham. But for you, how would you say that you are happy? No? Sino gustong sumagot? Sino yung mga wala last meeting? Si Ivan. Wala si Ivan. Ivan, how can you say that you are happy? Or or what is happiness for you personally?
Sir, happiness for me is that the things that makes me parang uh, makes me relax and comfortable, sir.
Oh, yan. Who else? Sino pa yung wala nung last meeting? Si Jester. Si Jester nung last meeting. What is happiness for you? Or how can you be happy? Paano mo masasabing masaya ka? Jester, are you there?
No, sir. Sir, connection kasi din.
Okay naman,
Hello, sir.
naririnig naman kayo.
Sir, pakiulit yung question, sir.
How can you say that you are happy? Or ano ang happiness para sa iyo, Brother Jester?
Oh. Si happiness para sa yung fun, sir, yung kompleto ang pamilya, sir, tapos may pagkain.
Oh, so yung happiness sa iyo is something na may connected sa no? Personal, or what do you call this, ay yung primary needs ng human. How about sa'yo, Rene? What is happiness?
Mag-milyonaryo na ako, sir.
Wow. Very sensual. Yan. So, kay Bentham, happiness is something na dapat rini-reach ng every individual kay Bentham. Bakit daw? Kasi nga sabi ni Bentham, happiness is the goal, should be the goal of every individual. So yun yung theory ni Bentham. Saan niya ba ginamit to? Itong utilitarianism. Nagamit niya to sa concepts ng economic freedom. Yun. Ito pala yung mga kanya. Ito yung mga pinaglaban niya or yung mga advocacies niya. So, he is for economic freedom. He is an advocate of the separation of church and state, the freedom of expression, equal rights of women, which is nung time na yon, of course, big deal. Kasi women are not allowed to vote in those times. The right for divorce, and the decriminalizing of homosexual acts. Siyempre, nung time na yon, hindi pa laganap ang LGBTQ. So to say, medyo makitid pang utak nila in terms of gender and the role of women in the society. And Bentham si Bentham ang isa sa mga pinakaunang ipinaglaban yung mga karapatan na to na for him he thinks that is naaapakan or naaabuso ng iba. So, ang mga ideas pa na he agreed upon is this, no? Abolition of slavery. Of course, nung panahon na yun, laganap pa ang slaves. And the abolition of death penalty. The abolition of physical punishment, including that of children. And of course, yung favorite ko na advocate niya, the advocate of animal rights. Bakit? Kasi nung panahon ni Bentham, siguro sa ngayon, panahon natin ngayon, yung mga taong nag-agree sa animal rights, well, hindi na siya bago. Kasi marami ng tao ang advocate ng animal rights. Pero nung panahon ni Bentham, they were focusing more on rights ng mga tao kasi kakatapos ng gera, and then meron pang slaves na mga negro, and then yun. Pero sabi ni sabi ni Bentham, no, even the rights of animals should also be should be fought for, sabi niya. So yun. Naging student niya and secretary si James Mill, which is yung mali yan, no? Not the son, who is the father of John Stuart Mill. Yun. Trivia lang, hindi na ingat no. Hindi nakalibing si Bentham. Ano din ang ginawa sa kanya? Dinisect yung katawan niya, preserve, and dinisplay sa school kung saan siya nagturo and nagstay din. So, yun. Kumbaga sa animal, naging taxidermy yung kanyang katawan. And also, isa sa mga pinaglaban niya is the general availability of education. Remember that in his time, tulad nga ng sabi ko, schools where black people attend and where white people attend are different. Kaya, yun, para sa kanya, education should be a general idea, not something na privilege lang ng karamihan. So, yun, which is something na magandang advocate din, magandang advocacy. So, yun lang yung background ni Jeremy Bentham. And punta naman na tayo ngayon sa kanyang philosophy of the human person. Sabi niya, nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign matters. Matters, double T dapat yan. Sorry. Pain and pleasure. It is alone for them to point out what we ought to do, as well as to determine what we shall do. On the one hand, the standard of right and wrong. On the other hand, the chain of causes and effects, and fastened to their throne. They govern us in all we do, in all we say, and in all we think. Every effort we can make to throw off our subjection, which will serve but to demonstrate and confirm it. Those two ang things na important isa sa mga important concepts sa philosophy ni Bentham, yung tinatawag nating pain and pleasure. Sabi ni Bentham, it should always be the goal of an individual should always be to reach this pleasure or full pleasure and to avoid pain, sabi niya. So the greater the pleasure and the lesser the pain, then the more utilitarian it is, sabi ni Bentham. And of course, sabi niya, it is what governs us in what we do, what we say, and what we think. I remember the religion, Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, surviving religions. Ah, siguro sasabihin mo especially sa Christianity. No? Sabi mong matanda na rin ang Christianity. We've been here for around 2,000 years. But Zoroastrians are more older. They they existed for 3,500 years before Christianity. Therefore, sabihin mo na lang almost times 3 ng age ng Christianity ang Zoroastrianism. And yun is isa sa mga main concept nila is what we call that yung tatlong G or tatlong good. Good action, good words, and good thoughts. Which is, if we look at the philosophy of Bentham, similar. What we do, what we say, and what we think. Good thoughts, good words, and good actions. So yun, para kay Bentham, that is what governs us. Of course, if the greater the pleasure, the better it is, sabi ni Bentham. So yun, human behavior is governed by pain and pleasure. And that each person acts to secure his or her own good. And it also helps in identifying what is good and moral. Yun yung philosophy ni Bentham. And it became his foundation in social, legal, moral reforms in society. Bakit ito yung sinasabi ni Bentham na dapat magbago ang society gamit yung kanyang theory? Well, because he conceived of this theory kasi nararanasan nila or ng mga tao nung panahon na nabubuhay pa siya. That's why by reflecting on what is happening around him, he devised or he thought of this theory, the theory of utility. And sabi pa dito, we desire pleasure to the judgment that we ought to pursue pleasure. So, yun yung main na goal natin daw as individuals, to pursue pleasure. To approve or disapprove is the same as saying about an act that is good or bad, or right or wrong. And the basis of morality for Bentham is utility. So yun, as long as napapakinabangan siya, sabi ni Bentham, na marami ang nakikinabang, then it is moral, sabi ni Jeremy. But yun, kalaunan marirealize natin mamaya that utility sometimes has a problem too. Or yung specifically yung utility na dinefine ni Bentham. Because Stuart Mill defined utility in a different way kay Bentham. There are similarities pero may onti siyang iniba. So, yun. Ano nga bang utility? Sabi ni Bentham. It refers to the property of an object which produces naulit na naman. Which produces benefit, advantage, pleasure, good, or happiness. So, this is everything. Sabi niya, advantage of pleasure, good, or happiness. Man is constituted that he must always seek pleasure and that he has duty to do so as well. So yun yung main goal ng individual, sabi ni Bentham, to reach for pleasure because this is the goal of utilitarianism. And sabi niya, it is the supreme good for humanity. And yun, Sabi nga kanina, the greatest happiness of the greatest number is the end of right action. So each person is psychologically disposed to seek his or her own happiness, but morality requires that one acts to bring about the greatest good for everyone. Human acts were to be justified based on the utilitarian principle. The value of human act depends upon the consequences it gives. In turns, implies the usefulness of action. Again, balikan natin. Um, Sabi ko nga kanina, merong problema ang philosophy ni Bentham. Like any other philosophy, lahat may problema. Lahat may butas. Lahat may drawbacks. And ano yon? Um, the problem with the philosophy of Bentham is that he is treating it in an individual way. Isa-isa instead of one as a society. And sabi ng mga psychologists, though hindi siya na-prove, siguro dahil loner siya and his relationship with other people is something na hindi maganda. Kaya it affected his philosophy na masyadong medyo personal and egoistic. Yun yung term, no? Masyadong personal and egoistic and private yung pleasure na sinasabi ni Bentham. Unlike kay Mill na matututunan natin mamaya, his idea of this um, pleasure or of this utility is something na it is also connected to the other. So yun. Another sabi ni sabi dito, and another thing with Bentham is that he is a consequentialist or a supporter of the theory of consequentialism. Ano ba tong consequentialism? Ito yung kabaliktaran ng tinatawag nating intention. So instead of looking at an action with its intentions, nagbe-base sila sa consequences. So if example, to apply it no in application, may binalak kang patayin and then hindi ka nag-succeed, hindi mo siya napatay. For the consequentialist theory, walang kasalanan because the consequences is that hindi mo siya napatay but your intention is to kill. Pero sa consequentialism, it doesn't count that you did something bad kasi nga they focus on consequences rather than the intention. And ang maganda rin kay Bentham sa kanyang theory is that he treats one individual with the same value as any other individual. For example, para kay Bentham, I, who can be considered nothing or no one, is the same value as the President of the Philippines. Para kay Bentham, because each individual in Bentham's view has the same value. Mayaman, mahirap, matalino, hindi. Whoever you are, sabi ni Bentham, your value is the same for the value of another. So yun, equal value. Equal value. And what else? Sabi niya dito, he was just not referring to the usefulness of human acts, but to the extent to which these acts promote the general happiness. He identified utility or usefulness in terms of the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. So in his concept utilitarianism, the purpose of human act is happiness. A human act is considered good or bad or wrong on the basis of the consequences it will lead to. Again, nabanggit ko na kanina, consequentialism. So the worthiness of an act is based upon the consequences of that act. The most moral acts are those which maximize pleasure and minimize pain. An act is moral if it brings the greatest amount of pleasure and the least amount of pain. So yun, nabanggit ko naman na lahat yan kanina. So yun yung philosophy ni Bentham. Na later on, in-improve or dinagdagan and mas pinaganda ni John Stuart Mill. So, any tanong kay Jeremy Bentham? Guys? May tanong kayo kay Bentham? Anyone?
Wala sir.
Naintindihan nyo? Nagets nyo ba? Guys? Nagets ba? Nagets? Ano yun?
Okay po, sir.
Yun. Then, punta na tayo kay John Stuart Mill. Pero before yan, tanungin ko muna kayo. Can you measure pain and pleasure? Sino yung mga hindi pa nagsagot? Si Juan. Si Stephen, saka si Joshua. Tapos si Juan. Si Gabi. Stephen. Brother.
No, sir.
Pwede mo bang i-measure ang pleasure and pain?
Nag-vlog ka niyo?
Can you measure pain and
Sir,
pleasure?
ano po, sir?
Can you measure pain
No,
and
sir.
pleasure? No. So,
Why?
why?
No, sir.
Why?
Because, sir, dahil ang pleasure, sir, ay ano tawag yun? Hindi po siya ma-measure, sir, kasi pwedeng mananatili hanggat dinamdamin mo, sir.
Ganon.
Pleasure and
Pain.
tapos yung sakit, sir, ay hindi po, sir. Hindi po yan ma-measure kasi hindi mo mang sabihin na ang sakit ng o sinasabi mo na lang na masakit yung damdamin mo ng 1/4. Parang ganun, sir. Hindi mo naman pwedeng ganun, sir.
Tama naman. No? Tama naman. Kasi hindi siya tangible. Hindi mo pwedeng hawakan na bilangin. Kaya cannot be measured. Pero, of course, tanungin naman natin si Brother Joshua. Kasi yung kanyang personal idea. Para sa'yo, can you measure
afternoon,
pleasure
sir.
and pain? Good afternoon. Can you measure pain and pleasure?
No, sir,
Bakit?
because it's an emotion po, sir. Hindi naman po siya pwede mong sabihin na yung pleasure mo, sir, hindi naman sinasabi na 100% yung pleasure na naramdaman ko dito. Ganun. Tapos mamaya pwede mong sabihin na 50%, ganun man. Sir, hindi naman
Okay.
siya pwedeng i-experiment kasi, sir, kaya hindi mo siya pwedeng i-measure. Yun, sir.
Okay. Okay. Good answer. Okay, last, si Gabi. Can you measure, para sa'yo, can you measure pain and pleasure?
Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
No din po, sir. Kasi
Bakit?
in my opinion po is parang there is no timeline for pain and pleasure. Parang hindi mo pwedeng at ganun din po yung sagot ko sa kanila kasi po basta para sa akin po is there's no timeline po talaga. Hindi mo pwedeng sabihin na okay, wala na yung pain. Okay, ito na yung pleasure. Hindi mo po pwedeng sabihin yun. Kaya po siguro yun ang nakikita ko na talagang there's no timeline about pain and pleasure.
Okay. Very good naman yung mga sagot nyo. Pero kung kausap nyo ngayon, si Bentham tsaka si Mil, hindi na kayo nag-coincide. Kasi actually, si Bentham, no? Kumuha siya ng, hindi ko alam kung bakit niya ginawa or paano niya ginawa. Pero para sa akin rin it is absurd. Gumawa siya ng mathematical equation kung saan pwede mong i-measure ang pain and pleasure. And it's just fascinating that he looked at pain and pleasure as something na object. Something na pwede mong experiment and observe. Pero kay Mill, sabi niya, medyo lumampas ka na dun na part, sabi niya. Actually, si Mill, anak siya ni James Mill na nabanggit na natin kanina. Which is siya yung, guys, naririnig niyo pa ba ako?
Yes, sir.
Ay, sige. Siya yung secretary
Yes, sir.
ni Bentham, si James Mill. And then, ang anak niya na si John Stuart Mill, which is yung next na philosopher na pagkaaralan natin. And mag-take down kayo kasi hindi ako gumawa ng notes dito. Sinulat-sulat ko lang. Walang encode. Yon. Yon. Bata pa lang si Mill, si John Stuart, tulad ni Bentham, prodigy na din siya, matalino na siya. Imagine 3 years old nagbabasa ng novel, babasa ng libro, 8 years old natuto mag-Latin, mag-Greek, and then binasa niyo yung mga sikat na novels, Don Quixote and things like that. Binasa niyo yung mga libro nila Plato, Aristotle. Ganun siya katalino. Kaya lang this happened because of his father, si James Mill. Ano bang ginawa ni James Mill? Well, si James Mill, sinadya niyang palakihin si John Stuart in a not so normal life as a child. Bata pa lang pinilit or nilagay na niya si John Stuart sa present ng libro. Natural, magbabasa siya. And then, hindi siya ganong nakikisalamuha sa ibang mga bata. Hindi tulad natin nung bata pa tayo that we play outside, we have a life as children. Pero si Mill, si John Stewart, that's not the case for him. And yun, ang ka-close niya lang na child sa buhay niya is yung mga kapatid niya. Pero kung sa iba, there's no relationship. Bakit ginawa to ni James Mill? For one purpose, sabi niya, so that he can create a genius intellect. Ano yung, wait lang.
Sir, wala daw signal si Gab.
Okay lang, naka-record naman. Sabi niya, because, sabi ni James Mill, he did this so he could create a genius intellect that would carry on the cause of utilitarianism and its implementation after he and Bentham died. Anong ibig sabihin? Para kapag wala na si Bentham tsaka si James Mill, meron si John Stuart Mill na sinadya nilang palakihin para aralin ang utilitarianism. So, kung tutusin, it's a bit selfish as a parent. sa side ni James Mill na kalaunan makikita natin or malalaman natin that it had an effect on John Stewart. Nagkaroon si John Stewart ng psychological problems. Karoon siya ng depression and mental health issues dahil sa hindi magandang childhood na nangyari sa buhay ni John Stewart. So, yun. Sabi ni John Stewart, ipina-explain sa kanya bakit karoon siya ng mental issues or mental health issues. Kasi sabi niya, it's because of the physical and mental arduousness of his studies. Or yung hirap ng pag-aaral niya at a young age. Sabi niya, hindi ako nagkaroon ng normal na childhood. And of course, there was a longing for him deeply inside him na gusto niya maging normal na bata. Pero dahil nga sa ginawa ng papa niya, ang nangyari is that, yun, hindi naging normal yung kanyang childhood and it affected him when he grew up. Hindi pa niya naranasan yung side effects nung bata pa niya. Pero nung tumanda siya at the age of 20, doon na nagsimula. Karoon siya ng mental health issues. So, moreover, si John Stuart Mill, one time, when he was 14, nakitira siya sa bahay ni Samuel Bentham, na kapatid ni Jeremy Bentham. And si Samuel Bentham nakitira sa malapit sa bundok. And dahil doon nagkaroon ng fascination sa mountains or sa landscape si John Stewart na naging tumulong sa kanya para malabanan yung kanyang mental issues. So, and other than that, ano pa yung nakatulong sa kanya para ayusin yung kanyang mental health? Nangyari is nakilala niya si Harriet Taylor. And then kinasal sila. Meron ding theory si Harriet Taylor. Meron din siyang book or sinulat. And they agree with each other in terms of yung sinulat ni Harriet Taylor. And yon, kasi pinaglalaban rin ni Harriet Taylor ang women's right, which is something that he and John Stewart agree upon. Actually, si John Stewart, madikit siya sa mga babae na Harriet ang pangalan. Kasi the mother of John Stewart is also named Harriet Borough. And then yung napangasawa niya, si Harriet Taylor. So yun. Yun lang yung kanyang mga nangyari sa buhay niya. Makulay naman kahit papano yung buhay ni John Stuart Mill. Pero we're done with that. Tapos na tayo sa buhay niya. Punta naman tayo ngayon sa kanyang philosophy and sa kanyang ideas. Para sa kanya, importante ang freedom because it leads to self-improvement. Binigyan tayo ng freedom in order for us na pwede nating ma-improve yung ating sarili. Yon. And pero sabi ni Mill, the problem is that we can have this improvement, sabi niya, only if and only if we would not harm others or the society at large. Meaning that our self-improvement as individuals is connected also to the improvement of the society. Meaning na kailangan rin nating isipin yung mga nasa paligid natin bago tayo gumawa ng actions. Bakit ko to nabanggit? Kasi unlike kay Bentham, you have to first think of your own pleasure or own personal pleasure bago mo ilagay sa or i-prioritize yung pleasure ng iba. So, sarili mo na bago iba. Pero sabi ni Mill, you have to think about the pleasure of the other also in connection to your own pleasure. So, yon. Pinaglaban rin ni Mill ang rights ng women para bumoto. So, yun lang. Isa sa mga importanteng advocates ni John Stuart Mill. So, yung principle ni Mill is yung tinatawag niya na greatest happiness principle. Like kay Bentham, ito na yung pagkakaparehas nila. Okay? Parehas sila ng idea na the greatest pleasure or that man ought to choose those acts that generate the greatest quantity of pleasure. Anong ibig sabihin ko doon? That tulad nung sinabi ni sinabi ko kanina about kay Bentham, man would always want the greatest pleasure. Sino bang taong gustong palaging nasasaktan? Sinong tao ang gusto ng pain? Of course, you want pleasure. Kaya same sila ng idea ni Jeremy Bentham. And another similarity is that one should naturally help other people to achieve happiness because ito na yung different. Ito na yung iba sa theory ni Mill. Sabi ni Mill, one should naturally help other people achieve happiness because in this way he should secure his own. So yun, connecting your happiness to the happiness of another individual. So the maximization of pleasure and happiness is the moral end. Or in another term, the minimization of pain is a moral end. So again, paulit-ulit, maximization of pleasure and minimization of pain. And yon, para kay Mill, the word desire means it's something that we ought to choose. Meaning para kay John Stuart Mill, we want to attain happiness and pleasure not because gusto natin ng masarap na buhay, ayaw natin ng mahirap. Pero para sa kanya, we want to attain this pleasure because it is what is moral. Sabi. It is not what we want to choose, but instead it is what we should choose. Sabi ni John Stuart Mill. So, yon. And ang isa pa sa importante sa kanyang philosophy is yung idea ng quality. 'Di ba kay Bentham, it's quantity. The more people na nakikinabang sa pleasure, the better. To put it in perspective, meron yung idea na kung alam niyo yon, yung pinakasikat na psychological test, kung saan bibigyan ka ng ikaw yung driver daw ng isang train and then may choice ka between going left and going right. And sa left, merong 3 or 4 na tao na masasagasaan yung train. And then sa right, may isa. With the use of Bentham, by applying the concept of Bentham, of course, ang pipiliin mo yung isa to save 1 versus 3. Pero kay Mill, you have first to look at the quality. For example, yung isang tao is that he is the president, sabi mo na lang. And then sa other part, they are lower people, sabi mo na lang, drug lords. So it's not just about the quantity, hindi lang sa dami. But we should also focus on the quality, sabi ni John Stuart Mill. So, yun. And yun yung isa sa mga important concepts na unique kay Mill. Quality versus quantity. So, another is sabi dito, man will not be content with body pleasures, but will desire that which is mentally pleasurable. Kung kay Jeremy Bentham, he focuses on the idea ng what we call sensual pleasure o yung pleasure ng physical body. Para naman kay John Stewart, he focuses more on this what we call pleasures of the mind or mental pleasures. Yung kasi nga rational tayo. We have minds. Kaya hindi, it's not just our senses that we use. Ano ba tong mga mental pleasure? Yung time na yung unang higop mo ng kape, that's already pleasure. Or yung satisfaction mo kasi nakatulong ka sa iba, that's already a pleasure and a form of happiness. Or yung part na ginawa mo yung assignment mo, ginawa mo yung exam mo, that's already happiness and pleasure. No, those little things. Unlike sa cliche na idea natin ng pleasure, kasi yung iba sa atin, ang tingin sa pleasure is something that is physical. No? Pag-inom, paninigarilyo, bisyo, sex. No, it's not that kind of pleasure. Sabi ni Mill, we are rational beings, therefore our pleasures should also be rational. That's why no, it is more than sensual pleasure. And isa pang importanteng sinabi ni John Stuart Mill. If there is little pain, it's not bad. As long as for the long run, it serves the society as a whole. Anong ibig sabihin na? As okay lang na merong in a while, once in a while, may pain kang nararamdaman. Basta alam mo na yung pain na yun, it will have a good effect or a pleasurable effect in the future. For example, pagod ka na pero kailangan mo pang magbasa ng libro na 5 na binigay ni sir kasi kailangan basahin para sa oral exam. And that is pain. Kasi mahirap magbasa, mahirap umintindi. But in the long run, it's pleasurable. Kasi makikinabang ka rin doon. You wanted to finish your studies. Gusto mo maging pari, but you do not want to study. So those things, even those little things, are forms of pleasure. Sabi ni Mill, you have to sacrifice some things to attain pleasure. Kailangan mo rin makaramdam ng pain paminsan-minsan. Tulad nga ng sabi ko, magbasa ka, ayaw mo magbasa ng 5 books kasi mahirap. But in the long run, it will give off or it will provide this pleasure. So, yun yung sabi ni John Stuart Mill. Sabi ni Sir Matt. Yun yung sabi ni Sir Matt. Yun. Yun nga, sabi ko kanina, the problem with the utilitarian ni Bentham is that nagiging mukhang selfish ang mga tao. Kasi maalala nyo, paulit-ulit kanina kay Bentham na an individual should seek for his own pleasure. Yung pagkakasabi pa lang ng words na individual and his own is already egoistic and selfish. Pero kay Mill, sabi niya, that's not the case, sabi ni Mill. Kasi there are actions naman daw that can also cause pleasure. Not just to the self, but to the other. Anong example ng mga to? Kuan, pagbibigay sa iba, no? Charity. It gives you this pleasure of happiness or fulfillment that you help an individual. And at the same time, it gives of the pleasure and happiness dun sa nabigyan, no? And ang tanong ngayon ni Mil, paano naging selfish yun? That's why sabi ni Mil, it doesn't mean that if you want things that are pleasurable, that it means already that you are selfish, no? That hindi naman yun. Kunwari yun nga, yung magsasacrifice ka ng pain na nahirapan ka mag-aral. No? But in the long run, yung pleasure na maa-attain mo, hindi lang sa'yo, para sa parents mo, para sa ibang tao. And yun yung difference ng kay Mill and kay Bentham. The other one is more on the idea that man is selfish, pero kay John Stuart Mill is that man is someone na attends also in a way to the needs of others. So, yun. 'Di ba sabi nga sa utilitarian ni, how do we define again the utilitarian of Bentham? The greatest happiness of the greatest number. Pero para kay Mill sabi niya, the happiness of all and not just one own's happiness is the utilitarian standard. So you have to include also others sa happiness na tinutukoy mo and not just on your own. To connect it, no, sa idea ng Christianity, loving one's neighbor as you love oneself. And yon, again, paulit-ulit, it's beyond mere sensual pleasure. Hindi lang siya pleasure ng physical body, kundi sabi nga ni Mill, we are rational beings. Therefore, our pleasure should also be rational. Our pleasures should also be mental. Hindi lang siya sensual. So, yun. It is not happiness, sabi ni Mill, that directs our moral thought, but it is the sense of duty to the other. So it's not an external standard of goodness, but an internal standard of goodness. So yon ang philosophy ni John Stuart Mill. And to end this, sabi nga ni Jeremy Bentham, stretching his hands up to reach the stars, too often man forgets the flowers at his feet. Diba? Ang gandang quote na minsan kasi ang tao, he reach for things na sobra-sobra. But he forgets to appreciate the things na sa kanyang paligid. Buhay ang Pilipinas. So yun yung philosophy ni Jeremy Bentham and Stuart Mill. Pero ano ang drawback ng kanilang philosophy? Dito yung mga tinatawag natin na philosophy na armchair philosophies. Bakit armchair? Kasi nga pinag-uusapan lang sila habang nakaupo. Pinag-uusapan lang sila na as theories. Hindi totoo. Kasi hindi naman na-actualize yung kanilang utilitarianism. They are just theories. So yun yung drawback ng kanilang philosophy. No? It's just that they were theories, but in a way, hindi sila fully na apply sa society. So yun lang. Sabi nga, pero yun, they are both in the idea na happiness should be pursued. Sabi nga sa movie na The Pursuit of Happiness, happiness with a Y. Sabi dun, the thing is that happiness would always be pursued. Pag nakuha mo na yung happiness mo ngayon, and then, ang mangyari is magkakaroon ka na naman ng bagong happiness. Gusto mo na naman ng ibang happiness. Then magpe-pursue ka na naman. Kaya nga the pursuit of happiness. Palaging yung happiness nagbabago, no? Palipat-lipat. Palagi mo siyang hinahabol. Hindi nakukontento ang tao. So, yun lang. Any questions kay Bentham and Mill? Any questions? Ang magtatanong plus 5. Ano? Ang magtatanong plus 5. Ayaw nyo? Bakit pag kay Sir Matt nagre-reset kayo? Daya kayo ko, hindi ata kayo nakikinig sa akin.